I'm finally the president's wife. The day of becoming rich has come. All of the inheritance is ours. We won't give away a single dime. Even right after the father-in-law's funeral, her behavior. I couldn't understand it at all. Beyond anger, it's almost laughable. What a pitiful woman she must be to act like this. Well, she's about to learn the truth soon enough. I am Emily, a 69-year-old who got completely hooked on your cleaning videos I found on YouTube. You might think it looks dirty at first, but surprisingly, it's really refreshing. I'm completely addicted to it. But even though I'm like that, I'm going to tell you the most refreshing story of my life now. One day, my eldest son John contacted me and said, "I'm getting married because my girlfriend's pregnant." At that time, it wasn't uncommon for people to be pregnant before they were married. So it wasn't that surprising. However, I felt a bit uneasy about the way he said, "I'm getting married because my girlfriend's pregnant." If he had said, "My girlfriend is pregnant, so it's a good opportunity to get married and raise the child together," I could have understood it better. Did he not consider marrying his girlfriend if they didn't have a child? Well, maybe I'm overthinking the words of young people, but in the end, we welcomed Julia as our son John's wife. Our family has been running a company for generations. It was originally a small company, but it grew significantly during my husband's generation. Although we didn't explicitly discuss it, we assumed that John would take over the company after my husband. Therefore, the qualities of the woman who would become John's wife were of great concern to us. However, it seems that Julia was short-tempered, money-minded, and selfish. She behaved quietly during the wedding greetings and ceremony. So we didn't notice, but every time they came back home, their true nature began to show. Later, I found out that John and Julia's dating period was incredibly short. However, Julia had been strongly insisting on getting married since the early days of their relationship. Upon hearing such stories, suspicions of whether she was after money began to linger among us. To put it bluntly, Julia's actions seemed like a well-planned trap. Maybe she was targeting John. During her pregnancy, Julia kept saying to everyone, "This child is the future president." For this reason, she named our grandchild Lekal. She said it meant a leader of a company loved by everyone, and seemed satisfied, but our family was strongly opposed. However, Julia paid no attention to others' opinions and named the grandchild Lekal. Everyone present felt sorry for his name. Our hands were trembling when we held him. You think they should just get a divorce and kick her out of the house, right? My husband and I actually considered such an option at one point. We secretly conducted a DNA test on John and the grandchild after their birth, and it was indeed John's child. At that point, we couldn't really think kicking Julia out was a good idea. Although we had doubts about whether she could take care of the child properly with such a strange name, we couldn't deny that our grandchild was adorable. After discussing with my husband, we concluded that as long as John didn't wish for a divorce, we should quietly observe and support our son's family. Therefore, we didn't forcefully separate the couple and decided to continue watching over our son's family. Well, my daughter has become a bit of a busybody and seems to want to kick Julia out immediately, saying that woman is absolutely no good. Well, I can understand my daughter's feelings. After giving birth, Julia avoided any contact with us, citing childcare as the reason. and we became somewhat distant. But when Lekal turned 5, John came back home one day alone and said, "My wife is making our child attend too many lessons, and it's pitiful." These included swimming, dance, Chinese, and even a special school to boost cognitive abilities for the future. We believe that children should have plenty of playtime and grow up freely. So we were troubled by this story. It seemed that John himself wasn't entirely comfortable with Julia's strict educational approach. But there was also the fact that this was his first experience with parenting, and he didn't know what was right. After a discussion involving our daughter, we decided to have John visit us with the whole family, and there we would assess the situation and intervene if necessary, with John's consent. She didn't seem to want to come, but John persuaded her. It had been a long time since we last met, but it was a very surprising meeting, in a bad way. "Did you invite us here because you finally accept this child as the heir?" Huh? Upon meeting again after a long time, Julia immediately brought up the topic of the heir. Naturally, those around couldn't hide their surprise. In the first place, even if John were to inherit the family business, the decision regarding the heir would not be up to us. My husband and I had discussed that the person to take over the company after John should be decided by the next generation. However, it seemed that due to our opposition to the name choice for the grandchild, Julia had convinced herself that we were opposed to the name and her, because we disliked her. So, Julia had baseless suspicions regarding the heir issue as well, saying, "You don't intend to make our child who I gave birth to the heir." Honestly, as long as they have a solid business acumen and good character, it doesn't matter who becomes president. My daughter didn't want to expose her nephew to the awkward atmosphere among the adults. When our daughter invited Lekal to play, Julia immediately slapped her hand away and shouted, "Don't try to separate the future heir from me," as if we were kidnappers. Seeing Julia's behavior, my husband and I couldn't remain silent any longer and said, "Aren't you overreacting a bit? We had refrained from intervening in John and Julia's issues until now. But when our daughter was unjustly slapped, we couldn't help but speak up." However, Julia became angry, saying, "Isn't it common courtesy to ask for my permission before taking my child out?" Certainly, Julia had a point, but the atmosphere at that time didn't seem all like she could have asked. Besides, if we had asked for such permission, Julia would undoubtedly respond with something like, "For the child's future, it's important he hears everything." We didn't want Lekal to hear such things. Nevertheless, there was no way to counter Julia's argument. My daughter just said, okay, I understand," and smoothly moved to another room. I wondered if this was the usual atmosphere in John's household. If so, I couldn't help but feel sorry for John. On the other hand, Julia seemed unbothered by the surroundings and began to take out workbooks. "It's study time, Lekal." She said that and lined up the workbooks in front of Lekal. When I glanced at the workbooks placed there, they said, 6th grade math and simple English for 7-year-olds. Lekal was only 5 years old. He should be in the prime age for playing. So wasn't this a bit too much? I could understand Julia's enthusiasm for education, but Lekal had come to his grandparents' house after a long time. Today should be a perfect time to let him play freely. "Julia, how about letting Lekal play today? Come on, just for today. What do you say?" While saying this, I looked at Lekal. and he was smiling happily, clearly eager to play. His innocent joy was so adorable that it made me smile too. I asked Lekal if he wanted to play, and he jumped up with excitement, saying, "Yeah." But at that moment, mother-in-law, don't try to put a bad influence on Lekal. I prioritize his future education. I didn't bring him here to play, so we're leaving, Julia said, pulling her grandson towards the front door, completely ignoring John's efforts to stop her. It seems like Julia is taking good care of the potential future president, but she's treating John, the next president, quite poorly. In the end, Julia left with Lekal, leaving John behind. That night, after a few drinks, I casually suggested, "Why not consider a divorce?" But John mentioned that with a young child and custody issues, divorce was not an option. There's also the possibility that Julia might cling to Lekal as the child who inherits the company, and problems could arise even after a divorce. John thinks that even if there were issues, it might be better for the child to have both parents around. But you'll continue as a pretend couple, right? And that might be tough for Lekal, don't you think? I conveyed this concern, but John replied, "I'll make sure it doesn't come to that," and seemed determined to keep their married life going. Ultimately, it's their issue to deal with, and we can't force them to divorce. Come to think of it, I heard a story where a couple separated shortly after marriage due to the husband's debt, but they later reconciled. Marriages comes in many shapes, and if John is content with this arrangement, then so be it. After this day, Julia and we became distant again, and it seems like John is making efforts to repair his relationship with his wife. Several years later, John and Julia had a second child, Rose. While we still don't meet with Julia, it appears that John's relationship with her has improved. John was thinking positively, saying, "We have children, we're married, so we should make it work." They might have once considered divorce, but if they can compromise and make it work, that's the best outcome. Marriage relationships can be complicated. For the two of them, this might be a fresh start. When their second child was born, Julia started bringing up the topic of a successor frequently. "John, you're over 30 now. Your father-in-law is also getting older. Don't you think it's time we seriously consider the company's succession?" she said. That's when I realized something. Julia temporarily patched things up with John and was eagerly waiting for John and his father to get older. In any case, Julia, who was fixated on the idea of a successor, showed affection to Lekal but didn't seem to have as much interest in their second daughter. In fact, she often complained to John she wanted a son. Of course, John loved both of them equally, so he gradually began to feel dissatisfied with Julia's behavior. If this was a TV drama, they would simply get a divorce, but reality didn't work out that way. During this time, Julia's parents fell ill, and John and Julia ended up living together to take care of them. It seemed that Julia's siblings unilaterally imposed the caregiving responsibility on her. It was getting difficult for Julia's elderly parents to understand things. When the topic of divorce came up, for some reason, John was accused of cheating and verbally abused, but there was no progress in the conversation. Furthermore, because the second grandchild was a girl and couldn't be the heir, it seemed that Julia's parents were also cold towards her. On the other hand, while Lekal was loved due to the pressure of studying, His relationship with Julia was deteriorating. One day, during Leco's high school years, he ran away from home. Fortunately, John quickly found him, but Leco didn't want to return home. He said, "I hate my mother, so I won't go back." Hearing this, Julia was furious and declared, "Fine, if you hate me that much, never come home." Nowadays, a girl too can become the president. Rose can be it. She then disowned Leco. Even in the midst of all this, Julia would often call us, saying, "Has the retirement time for father-in-law been decided? I think it's time to officially announce John the president." It seemed that Julia's obsession with the presidential seat had grown stronger since their early days of marriage. Several years passed, and by the time Leco had become an adult, my husband, who had been battling illness, passed away. Since receiving a cancer diagnosis several years ago, we had known that this day would come, and I thought I had prepared myself for it. Nevertheless, the sadness of losing a husband I had been with for many years was beyond imagination. The family was also deeply saddened, and we grieved throughout the funeral. Julia and her daughter, Rose, did not attend the funeral. Because Julia and we were estranged, we had never met Rose before. "Until the successor matter is clarified, I won't let you meet Rose," she said, giving inexplicable reasons. Not participating in the funeral of her father-in-law was, in my opinion, quite tactless. However, on a day like this, having the successor matter brought up would have been unbearable. There were also employees who had admired my husband over the years, and we wanted to avoid hearing uncomfortable things. So in the end, I even thought it was better they did not attend. After the funeral, as John and my daughter's family sat down for a meal, the doorbell rang. It was Julia and Rose. Meeting Rose for the first time, she resembled my son. At the front door, Julia greeted with a smile, "The funeral is over, right?" I thought it would be rude to skip it, so I came to offer my condolences. No need for that. Looking back, I might have been a bit rude, but I couldn't help but be bothered more by the fact that she didn't attend the funeral. For now, I just wanted to mourn my husband. Considering Julia's past actions, it was only natural that I didn't want to see her today. However, she insisted, saying, "But I'm here," and forcefully entered the house. Rose watched this with a perplexed expression. "Wait a minute, where are the ashes? Let me light a candle. Wait, can't you just leave us alone today?" I shouted. But Julia didn't pay attention and headed for the bedroom. When she found my husband's ashes, she started laughing and said, "Finally." "What are you saying?" "Finally. Finally, my father-in-law has passed away. I'm relieved. With this, I'll be the president's wife, and the inheritance is all ours. I won't give a single dime." Her statement left us not just angry but utterly dumbfounded. Even our daughter's family and John, who had rushed in upon hearing what had happened, stared wide-eyed at Julia's unbelievable words. Spotting John, Julia exclaimed, "Congratulations! Now you're the president," and hugged him. John, with an expression that seemed to say, "What is she saying?" remained immobilized. Seeing the two of them like that, my daughter burst into laughter and said, "Unbelievable? Is she for real?" At first, I was angry. But watching Julia be so obsessively fixated on becoming the president's wife was oddly amusing. Inspired by my daughter's laughter, I couldn't help but laugh too. Hey, why are you all laughing? Julia is glaring at us. Why do you think my brother will inherit the company? Huh? But he will, won't he? He's the eldest. Julia asks with a bewildered expression in response to her daughter's words. At that moment, John began to speak. Actually, after Dad got sick, I told him I wouldn't be succeeding him. I have it in writing. Julia raised her voice, exclaiming, "Wait! Why would you decide something like that on your own? I knew that if I became the heir, you'd continue to run wild just like now. Besides, I found a more suitable candidate." A more suitable candidate? Yes, for a while. My sister and mom will be serving as president and vice president. Your mother and sister? Why? They haven't even worked at your father's company. You had a management position, didn't you? You should be the president. That's exactly why. Just wait a moment, I'll go and get him. Get him? Who? Ignoring Julia's questioning, John went upstairs and brought someone with him. Lekal, why are you here? I thought you were living alone far away. Seeing her son, Lekal, whom she hadn't seen since he disappeared, Julia had a shocked expression. Lekal, who had swollen, teary eyes from the shock of his grandfather's passing, rubbed them and said, "Well, I heard you were up to something weird again. It's embarrassing. Actually, I've been here since high school. After Andy got married and moved out, I was using her room." Huh? What do you mean? Amid Julia's confusion, I took over their explanation. I'll explain. From the day Lekal disappeared, he was actually at our house. John was aware from the beginning of where Lekal was and respected Lekal's wish not to be with his mother. To protect Lekal, he told Julia that Lekal was staying at a friend's house, creating an environment where he could somehow live at our home. Lekal, exhausted emotionally, dropped out of high school, suddenly became fascinated by his grandfather's work as a businessman. He listened with genuine enthusiasm to my husband's stories about his work as a businessman and said, "Wow, I want to be like you." As he lived with us, Lekal, who had become a complete grandpa's boy, decided to work at his company with our encouragement and my husband's guidance. He saw Lekal's sincere dedication and began teaching him the ropes. Our wish as a couple was to give Lekal choices, whether he wanted to take over the company or pursue a different path. We wanted to provide him with the funds and skills needed for independence. Oh, I see. Well, even if I can't be the president's wife, I'll be the mother of the future president, right? Julia accepted the situation and relaxed her expression. Whether my husband becomes the president or my son does, it doesn't make that much difference, right? Why is everyone still laughing? I intend to divorce you. Huh? Julia was dumbfounded by John's words. Wait, why? Divorce? And I've talked to you about divorce several times before. My feelings haven't changed. Your parents are either in care facilities or deceased. There's no one left to stop the divorce. Rose is already 15 years old. She can choose custody for herself. Lekal still dislikes you as much as ever. If we divorce, I'll take custody of the children. What are you talking about? I can't accept that at all. The children are just rebelling against me right now. Right, Rose Lekal? You don't want us to divorce, right? Julia desperately appealed to the children. However, their reactions were cold. I've always disliked you, and I've been raised by Grandpa, Grandma, and Dad. I've wanted you to divorce for a long time. I don't think of you as my mother anymore. Don't act like my mother all of a sudden. You never cared about me or anything. I've come this far thanks to Dad and my brother." Lecole and Rose gave Julia a cold look. Lecole had wished for his parents' divorce for a long time. That's why John had decided to go through with a divorce. "That's how it is. Once things settle down with Dad, I'll proceed with the divorce. I'll make it work this time for sure, so be prepared." No way. Julia was disappointed by John's words and hung her head. Since Rose said she didn't want to go back with her mother, she spent the night at our house. And Julia was the only one who returned home. And then, later on, Julia repeatedly pleaded to John not to divorce, but John remained firm on his decision. And the divorce eventually went through. There seemed to be quite a dispute over the division of property. But thanks to a capable lawyer, major losses were avoided. Both children started a new life under John's care, and thus, the long-standing marital issues were resolved. Julia, driven by the ignorant but reckless belief that she would become a wealthy president's wife in the future, made unwise investments and purchased paintings touted as someday will become expensive and stored them in her parents' house. In the end, Julia couldn't become either the president's wife or the president's mother. Her investment created losses, and the paintings didn't sell. Currently, she takes care of her mother in a care facility and works multiple part-time jobs to make a living. She worked as a full-time employee for a while, but she complained that the job didn't pay well enough, ultimately leading to her dismissal. Afterward, she struggled to find stable employment. She has to do something about that personality that grew worse over age. Otherwise, life ahead would be challenging. On the other hand, our family enjoys peaceful and happy days. The grandchildren have grown up splendidly. As planned, Lecole has taken over the company and became a successful entrepreneur, while Rose has married a wonderful husband and is currently pregnant. John has also been working hard and supporting Lecole. I got married early, so have my children and grandchildren. And it seems I'll have the joy of seeing great-grandchildren. I've heard that when parents marry early, their children and grandchildren tend to do the same, and it seems to be true. In any case, it's a truly joyous thing. If things go well, I might even get to see great-great-grandchildren. But that might be a bit difficult. Still, I'm sure my husband in heaven is delighted about the birth of his great-grandchildren. In his place, I'll cherish and raise my grandchildren. From now on, I'll live a long and healthy life with enthusiasm. Goodbye.